Art is risky. Oddly, by its very nature, it's risky. In order to learn how to make something beautiful, you have to make something ugly, or at the very least, risk that possibility. And for any of you who have been at this for even the smallest amount of time, you know it's not just a risk, but it's a looming reality. But this innate need to risk something, to go out on a limb as an artist, seems to be countered by several other key aspects of many artists, an aversion to failure among them. We have a duality within us quite often, the desire to take risks or to have the benefits that come with risk-taking, and the desire to curl up like a hobbit in our hole, surrounded by things of comfort. But growth without risk is more of a fantasy than our dear hobbits. My name is Zach, and welcome to episode 77 of the podcast. Today, I'll be talking about risk-taking as artists and some of the ideas surrounding the topic. Feel free to check out the Discord and Patreon link below as we get started. Before we get started, however, what are some big artistic risks you have taken in the past? How did they turn out? And did the whole thing look different in the rearview mirror? Let us know in the comments below. Well, what do I mean by risk-taking, by taking these risks as an artist? I think it's always beneficial to start with a definition, even if it's not a global one, just one so, at least as I'm speaking, you know the context under which I am speaking. So, risk is defined as being exposed to danger, harm, or loss in a general fashion. From an artistic perspective, what is the danger, the harm, or the loss then? We have the danger of embarrassment, of failure, or wasted time. I think these are, for most of us, the biggest issues that we run into when we face risk as an artist. We don't like to make things that don't live up to the expectations we have. We can be embarrassed when other people see the work that we've done, sometimes even without that. We take a blow perhaps to our self-confidence, or we are less self-assured about how we can produce because of the embarrassing things we bring to light. Sometimes it's just the failure. We have this danger of becoming a failure in our own minds, though I don't think that's actually a reality. We have that fear for sure. And perhaps the most common of these fears for me is wasting time. I've gone through phases in my life as an artist where I have tracked every minute that I put into drawing just to make sure that I'm not wasting my time. We have the potential harm to our self-confidence, our reputation, or our finances. So, like I mentioned earlier, sometimes our self-confidence can be harmed when we step out onto a new area, when we try new things artistically. Taking these risks, we will often produce work that is lower quality in comparison to our past work. And if you're not careful, it's easy to let that overcome you, to think that, well, I guess this is the kind of artist I am now, the kind of art that I produce. And while that's not true, that hit to your self-confidence is all too common. Sometimes your reputation is harmed, especially if you have a public face in any regard. If you're in a gallery, if you have work online, even if you're in classes and you're trying new things, sometimes your reputation can take a dent. This sometimes happens in the form of teachers or loved ones and family who will look at your work and be like, oh, I like your past stuff more. And sometimes it's a lot harsher than that. But even a subtle comment can sometimes wreak havoc on our minds and harm us. And of course, our finances can take a hit. If you've put out a lot of money for supplies or classes or a degree, and, well, money is hard to come by, especially sometimes as an artist. And so our financial situation, our economic status can take a damaging hit from risk-taking when it comes to art. When it comes to loss, though, we have the potential loss of identity, along with the finances and time that were previously mentioned. Sometimes when you risk yourself, when you try new things as an artist, there can be a loss of who you are as an artist. You can start wondering about whether you're really a painter or a drawer, or if you're any good at this at all. Obviously, this is going to tie in with self-confidence, but there's a chance to lose money. There's the chance to lose time. There's the chance to lose. This, of course, paints it in a lovely light, does it not? When you hear all these things, it sounds like, well, yeah, we should avoid risks, shouldn't we? But this transitions rather nicely into reasonable versus unreasonable risks. And we will, of course, get into the benefits of taking some risks as an artist in a little bit. But let's talk about that first thing first. I think it stands to reason that the solution for what ails you artistically is never going to be one thing only. It is not going to be as simple as take more risks and you will see artistic success. Of course, it cannot be that simple. There are reasonable and unreasonable risks that you can take, and I think it is always beneficial to take a moment and analyze your situation. Do you have the freedom to take a particular risk right now? If it is only risking time, do you have time to waste? This is going to change tremendously depending on where you are in life. When I was younger, before being married or having a kid, I had so much time to waste. Granted, I wasted it in a lot of other ways, primarily on video games. But if you are in a position where you have time to waste, then that is probably a reasonable risk for you. If you're taking a financial risk, write off that money and see if you'll still be okay mentally. If it's going to cost you $30,000 to get a degree, just sit down and think about what it would be like to wake up tomorrow to have a skill set, but also have $30,000 of debt hanging over you. That might be an extreme example, so maybe take a look at it in a smaller way. What if you spent $500 getting a whole bunch of oil painting supplies to give oil painting a try? Would your life be tremendously worse if a year from now you were just out $500? These kinds of things will help you decipher your current situation. Can your ego or self-confidence take the hit if things go awry? This is another good thing to ask yourself. The more you understand yourself and your tendencies, the better poised you are going to be to take a look at the risks in a rational way and understand which are reasonable and which are not. And this is certainly going to be different from one person to the next and probably different for you personally at different points in your life. That all out of the way, let's dive in. Well, as promised, let's start talking about why we as artists need to take risks in the first place. There's certainly been a lot of descriptions so far that make it sound like it would be something best worth just refraining from, staying away from. Being a skill, however, art requires experimentation and honing in order to grow and improve. This is just a natural component of the thing. Practice, by its nature, puts you in a position where you are working on developing a thing you do not currently possess. As such, there is always a chance, in fact, likely an inevitable truth, that you will not always succeed. If you took things so slowly that you always hit your mark, you would be like a snail climbing a mountain. In an odd way, the risks we as artists have to take, or should take rather, seem to align across the entirety of the genre. In many cases, when I sit down to record these podcasts or write out the scripts, I approach art advice from two distinct perspectives. For the folk who want to progress and grow, and for the folk who are simply looking to enjoy the process. This, of course, is a gross oversimplification, but in this unique situation, I see the two aligned. Regardless of why you are approaching art and what your intended outcome might be, it seems that taking risks is beneficial to both. If, for example, you use art as a tool for joy, to relieve trauma or stress, or just for the fun of it, just because it makes your life better, failing to take risks eliminates the potential of finding new mediums, new styles which might serve your particular purpose better. If you stayed away from painting or sculpture, then you truly don't know if one of those two might be a better tool for soothing your soul, or if it might bring you even more happiness. This is a strange thing, but it seems to me the more that I pull this apart and think about this, look at my own life and go back to the lives of my students, if you refrain from engaging in new artistic things, from at least giving them a chance, you just never know what you are potentially missing. It is, of course, possible that you will try this new thing and hate it. But it is probably more likely that out of the dozens of different styles or mediums that you could try, that one or two of them will either be better than what you're currently doing or just simply align really, really well with it. For better or worse, we tend to put ourselves into a box as humans and maybe even more so as artists, and we have to fight our tendencies to pull ourselves out of it. So be careful with all of this. Likewise, if you are seeking to progress and grow in your artistic skills, it's easier to see why risk-taking is essential. If you don't step outside of what you know, you will not hone new skills. You will not discover new things, secrets, styles, and solutions. Even if you make progress by keeping things safe, you make progress much more slowly, and your time would be better spent occasionally risking a new technique or a new practice method. I spent years doing nothing but practicing, and the more that I analyzed why I was doing this, and especially now looking back, I was refusing to take the risk of actually executing finished products. And this was something that psychologically kept me safe. If you're practicing something, you don't expect good results. I spent a lot of time practicing anatomy and figure drawing, for example. And when those drawings didn't look good, I was okay with it because I knew that they weren't supposed to look good, that they're analytical in nature. But over time, I found that I had very little satisfaction in the kind of art I was producing because, personally, I would say I wasn't producing art. I was producing pre-art. This might not be a definition that you're comfortable with, but I'm talking about my own work here. I felt like all of that work was preparatory, and I had tricked myself into thinking that it was the actual thing when it never was. It would be like me spending hours and hours sketching out potential ideas for a piece like you see coming together in the background, but never actually sitting there and putting it down. I had the same feeling with the novels that I work on, where I thought I was working on them for 20 years, world building and slowly plodding along, but in reality, I'd accomplished almost nothing. It wasn't until I sat down and started writing a little bit every single day that they coalesced and came into being. Now they exist, and they're a thing that I love and am proud of. But I can only now, from my current perspective, sit back and analyze what I was doing in the past. I didn't know it in that moment. It took a long time of plodding slowly and practicing and being dissatisfied before I was able to analyze what was actually happening. So pay attention to yourself. And if you find that you do similar things, there's a chance that you, like me, are dedicated to the wrong thing, and that you need to allow yourself to take some risks and actually try to execute the things that are heavy upon your heart. In time, you will find something that serves you better, new ideas, new methods, new ways of moving through your art. But even if you didn't, you would have more confidence in your current application, in the current thing you're doing. So truly, stepping out and taking that small risk of trying something new is a win-win. If you learn something new, great. And if you don't, then you find even more confidence in what you've been doing all along. What do these risks actually look like, though? Because we've talked for 12 or 13 minutes now in the abstract. You as an artist need to get out there and you need to take risks. And I don't like spending too much time in the ethereal. Well, to be fair, I really enjoy spending a lot of time there. But I understand that for anyone who's not dealing with the constant chaos that is the interior of my own mind, it can be beneficial to actually take these balloons and tie them to the earth, as it were. So what do these risks look like? I'm going to bounce around on a couple things I talk about frequently on the channel and then spend a little bit more time on some that I don't. So as I'm doing so, if you would like me to spend more time on one of these individually, just let me know in the comments below. I always can use the feedback. It's helpful when I'm planning out the next things. For most of us, these risks simply look like things that might fail. We're worried about things that can go wrong. We stay away from things that would give us measurable negative results. This is exactly what I was talking about with me avoiding projects earlier. Sometimes it's the trying out of a new medium or subject matter. If you're really comfortable with drawing and brushes scare you, then painting can be really intimidating. If digital feels like this daunting thing, then it can be really hard to step into that because you're going to take a couple steps back from your current proficiency and you're going to be in a different situation. Likewise, if you work primarily in digital, traditional can sometimes be daunting because there's no Control Z. You can't layer things. You can't try things as much. These can all be daunting things to dive into, and sometimes for a lot of artists, these count as these risks. Sometimes it's just making art in a new location. Maybe you're very comfortable making it at home when you're alone, or you're very comfortable making it in class. But what about painting in plein air out in just public? What about sketching in the subway or at the mall or just out on a path somewhere? These situations are different and they all carry with them some level of risk for it. But what if you're going to do something a little bit more complicated? What if you have a desire to make art as a profession, as a career? That can be tremendously risky. For some of you, this is going to be the ever-present risk that sits in the back of your mind. You are going to have to chew on this. You're going to have to weigh the risk of engaging in something that is scary and has the potential to fail. And if you're going to invest enough time into it, it could look like I spent 6 years trying to make it as an artist. It didn't work. I just had to go get an office job. There are tremendous risks in that, especially if you involve anyone else. If you have a business partner of some kind, or even if you just tell your parents and your loved ones, this is what I want to do. I know a lot of us have run into this problem where you have these dreams and desires that are risky. And unfortunately, they become more risky because the people in your life who should be supporting you are not supportive. Sometimes it comes from a good place, right? Sometimes it comes from the mom or dad who they are scared that you'll fail and they want you to be prepared for it. Or they want you to be able to pay your own bills. Sometimes it's more selfish than that, where they don't want you living in their basement when you're 30 years old, or they want to make sure that you can take care of yourself so they can do their own thing. There's a lot of places this comes from, both good and bad. And if this is you, as I'm sure it is for many, many artists, I am sorry. I am sorry that you are in a situation where you don't have adequate familial support. This is one of those things that we should, as human beings, be able to count on. Our parents should be honest with us. They should prepare us for the world, but they should also be encouraging toward us. And they should help us sometimes on these crazy, adventurous dreams, even if they know in their heart of hearts that it's probably impractical. A good parent, a good family is going to provide you with the skills you need in order to take care of yourself, but also going to allow you to experiment. Maybe you are going to give it a try for a little while and it won't work. But if you had a family that was really encouraging of you to try those new things, you know what? That's probably also going to be a family that you're not going to be really embarrassed about coming back to and saying, man, I tried and I screwed up. I couldn't make it work. I decided that wasn't the life for me, whichever direction that goes. So if that's not you, then I'm sorry. My situation was unique. I had parents who were very supportive of the time I put into things, but part of the reason that I got an education degree on top of my graphic design degree was my father was fairly unwilling to allow me to get a degree that was just artistic. I didn't have much support there, either financial or, relational. And so I ended up with that degree. Now, I had a career as a teacher for 11 years, so it wasn't a bad thing. But in my 30s, I started looking back and going, man, I wonder what this would have been like if I would have had adequate encouragement, if I had had the push. Because I didn't have the confidence. I could have developed the skills, I can see that now, but back then I didn't have the confidence. If I had had people in my life who had helped instill that and encouraged me, what might I have accomplished? And I don't think it's necessarily wise to spend a lot of time there, but it is an okay thing to acknowledge those moments. I've chosen to use that as fuel to just waste no more time, or waste as little time as I can now. So I draw and I write constantly, because I don't want to get to 50 and have the same kind of regrets I do now. I want to get to 50 and look back and go, yeah, like at 35 to 50, like I buckled down, I got a ton done. And then I can choose to let go of the regrets from the time prior. But as you think about this art career, it could be a simpler form of that, maybe just one step into that arena. Maybe it's just starting the public-facing tier of that journey. Maybe you're looking at getting into a gallery in a little town like I live in. Maybe your goal is to put together an Instagram and start showing off your work. These are risky. If you put your work in a gallery, you're either going to have to pay to have your work there, you're going to have to work at the gallery, they're going to take a bit of the commission. So there's the risk both financially, and it's scary to have your work in the public eye. Even if you throw your work on Instagram, which is totally free, despite the fact that it costs some mental sanity, you are putting your art out there to be observed by other humans. And it's really easy to see that your artwork doesn't get much of a response from anyone, and then feeling like your art is not valuable. You look at other artists on the platform and go, wow, why is my work not receiving that kind of response? And it's easy to compare yourself. It can be risky and scary to do that, but I would also argue that if you can get past those hurdles, that using social media can be good for your artistic soul. If you're not worried too much about the response your art gets, it's kind of good for accountability to throw things up there. It's good to reference to people when you run into somebody out in the world and they go, "Oh, you're a painter? Well, what kind of paintings do you do?" It's nice to have it all collated in a single place. Maybe it's YouTube. Maybe you're thinking about starting a YouTube channel. And I've stated this a lot of times before. If you're thinking about it, I would just do it. You don't even have to make this stuff public at first if you don't want to. There's a lot of reasons to do this. You build up a lot of skills in the process. You learn a lot about the technology and how those things function. But also, it's good for you to think about the decisions you're making artistically. And you never know if that video is going to touch someone's soul in a really lovely and unique way. Maybe you want to start selling art for the first time, and so you're thinking about an online shop or you're thinking about art shows. Any of these are going to be pretty common risks for us as artists. And though the other ones that I just touched upon really briefly are certainly more common, I've talked about them a lot in a lot of different episodes. For most of us, those are going to be the kind of benchmark, most often encountered issues when it comes to risk taking, trying new things, embarking on a new journey that might fail, trying our hand at painting for the first time, or sculpture, or working with alabaster, or making art in an unfamiliar space, or art of an unfamiliar kind. Basically, a risk is going to be anything you aren't currently doing, particularly something that raises the hairs on the back of your neck or begins to tie that knot in your stomach. Something that scares you just that tiny bit. Starting this channel was a risk for me in a lot of ways. Being public and having to deal with friends and family able to see everything that I produce was probably the first hurdle I had to get over. Though it's not like my parents watch this channel and watch every video I put together. In fact, I didn't let them know about it until I've been doing it for 3 to 6 months. But it was a risk, and it still remains a risk. I try to make sure that I don't say things on here that could be offensive to anybody that I know in real life who's going to come through and listen to things. But it's less about that, and it's more about the fact that I'm on display. And while I don't care about that in the general sense, as a teacher, I was on display all the time. It is different when it's the people that you know and love in your personal life. And that was really uncomfortable for me at first. It kept me from doing this a lot longer than I should have let it. And it was a real consideration when I started to put this together, so much so that I didn't share with most people in my life that I was doing this until I had some measure of confidence about it. I have to be considerate of my words and how they affect others, especially in a scenario where I don't have the chance to clarify. This was risky and was scary to me at first. In fact, I still have sections that I cut out of videos to this day where it's just, I'm not sure that that is a good thing to say or that that will come across correctly. And there was a risk involved in that. There's a risk right now in recording this and watching the red area on my screen highlight as I record things and these little meters going up and down. There is risk to everything I put out there and everything that I say. Both that I could feel bad, that people could critique me on that, though I don't care probably as much as I should. But more to my thought on, I could say something that is taken as advice because I'm older and I'm an art teacher that could be damaging to someone else. And while I try to avoid all that, it's altogether impossible. I am putting out there, hopefully, my experience tainted with a little wisdom and hoping that good comes of it. But I can't actually control every single outcome. It would be very easy for me to get tied up and to take forever to write scripts and to re-record things over and over again, or just refrain from doing any of this at all because of that risk. That is a risk I consider every single time I sit down to record something. Because a lot of the time I'm not just recording content that is, here's how to draw this thing. I'm talking to artists, to humans, about things that are so intimate in each of us that there's always going to be a risk there. Obviously, there was just the risk of having my art up and around and visible. I was a little bit scared that people would see my artwork and either think or comment like, why are you doing this? You aren't as good as X channel. You aren't doing as good a work as this. You don't teach as efficiently as this. And those things are probably all true in some regard, but you get better at things by doing them. You get better at teaching by teaching. You get better at making videos by making them, etc. And that risk is what keeps so many of us from doing anything artistically. We're too afraid that we don't live up to the expectations of ourselves, the people around us, that we can't compare with everyone else. And, there's some relevance there. It's not a stupid perspective to have, but that is a risky aspect of throwing your art up online where anyone can see it. I was worried about if I'm good enough at making art to do this, if I'm good enough at making videos, which of course I wasn't at first because I hadn't made videos in like the last decade or so. I was worried that I wouldn't be, contributing something to the community, that I wouldn't be good enough at teaching compared to so many of these people. These were all risks that I had to consider, risks that I took when I sat down to put the channel together. But the channel has not been only risks. So I want to take a minute or two and talk about some of the benefits, because this whole episode so far has been about the necessity of us taking risks. And fortunately for me, I can actually talk about one big risk, this channel, and how I benefited from it. And I want to talk about this in terms of if the channel stopped functioning today, if I never made another cent off the channel, if I never got another view on the channel, if it didn't go anywhere, life pulled me away and I had to step away, how would I think about it? Because I feel like that's more honest. So let's talk about that for a second. The first thing is confidence. I have a lot more confidence in the fact that my words, my art, the things I talk about can be and are beneficial to other people. In a lot of ways, I hoped that this would be the case. But fortunately, with the thousands of comments, and especially the folk on the Discord server, I know now that my videos do help some people. Maybe they don't help a large percentage of the people who watch them, but they are helpful to some humans. That gives me confidence that the things that I am contributing are beneficial. And that's a lovely thing. Again, if I stopped making videos today, I would know that I have that ability. I would have confidence in my ability to do that. I've gotten a lot of feedback about the things that I teach. I've gotten a lot of feedback about the world building stuff. And it's been really good for me to know that like these things that I'm bringing up, I'm talking about, I'm giving voice to, are beneficial and decently received by other human beings. And that's a huge confidence booster. I've had a lot of skill development here though too. Obviously artistically, I've had to do so much work just in order to have the fuel for the channel. This has meant that I've done more work since I started the channel than probably, which I think has been about 2 years now. Yeah, we're right at 2 years and 2 months, I guess. So I've done more artwork in those last 2 years and 2 months than I have probably in the last 10 years before. And that's a wonderful thing. Again, talking about, easing regrets, I'm going to look back on this period and go, look at all the artwork that I have. And that's a great thing. But also, as I've been taking more time recently and trying to focus on teaching ink techniques, I'm having to go back and really analyze why I do things the way that I do. When I do that, I look at other artists, I look at things in nature, I look at my own past work, and I analyze. And when you take the time to teach a thing, you often get better at the actual thing itself. You have a more full understanding of it because you've got to step outside of just how you innately think about it, and it helps tremendously. I've gotten better at video editing. If you look at this video versus one from a long time ago, maybe not this one because this is just a podcast, it's mostly audio, but if you look at any of the edited videos, they are way better than the ones that I started off the channel with. The audio editing has been something I did not really think about, but I've gotten better at that. These are skills that are transferable though. That's the point of bringing them up here. These are things that if I walk away from doing the YouTube channel at some point, they're skills that can be applied other places. I've thought at different points about maybe taking up some little side gigs of doing audio and video editing for other YouTube channels. That exists as an opportunity now because of the time that I've invested here. The fact that I've spent 2 years now writing scripts, recording my voice, and talking about things is also nothing to shake a fist at. This is really beneficial. I've done so much writing in the past couple years. And I've gotten better about structuring things so that they're more intriguing at the beginning, rounding them out, building a thesis, talking about the thesis. All of this is really beneficial. I have the practice to do this in a much more efficient way now. And then I also just have a lot more knowledge about the artistic world. It's so easy to think that the little slice of the pie that you see in your own life is accurate. So getting comments on videos, especially when like I said something that doesn't align with a lot of other artists, is really good for me to know. I have a much better understanding of who I am, and then in conjunction with that, who I am in comparison to other artists than I ever would have otherwise. So even if this channel doesn't go anywhere beyond exactly where it is today, and I'm recording this on March 12th, then I still am happy with the time that I have invested here. This risk was worth it. This risk achieved a lot in and of itself, but also in lots of things outside of it. So thanks for bearing with me there. I just wanted to take a couple minutes and talk about it because otherwise it does feel a little ethereal to just talk about risk in this general floaty way. But this is a risk that I've taken in the last couple years, and I think that it's been tremendously beneficial to me. So if you're looking at anything like this in your own life, I would encourage you, consider it. Make sure you're safe. Make sure you're doing it in a wise way, but it might be worth your time. All right, before we close this out, I want to talk about two things really quickly. How to tell if you're not risking enough, and how to tell if you're risking too much. I think these are probably beneficial things just to mention for a moment. So if you're trying to think about if you're not risking enough artistically, when was the last time you did something that scared you a little bit, just art-wise? The last time you stepped out on a limb, you did something that kind of made you nervous. When was the last time you risked something in an art project? If you have a hard time kind of coming up with an answer to this, if everything you do is the same every single time you do it, then that might be a good indicator of it being time for you to step out of your shell a little bit, to try something new. This was certainly the case for me, as I mentioned earlier, when all of my artwork was just practice, when I was doing the same kind of thing all the time. It wasn't so much subject matter being consistent as it was the methodology. So for you, it might be one or the other. It might be that all your art is in a single medium. It might be all of your art is a single type, and it might be that you approach all of your art the same way. If any of these three are true, then I would encourage you to decide upon one avenue to explore. Just one at the beginning, and risk something engaging in that. If you don't draw from life at all, that would be like my number one proposal. Go start drawing from real things. You maybe start with reference at first if it makes you less nervous. And then whatever it is you draw, get out in the real world and draw that. It's going to tremendously augment your artwork. And if you only work with a single medium, especially if that medium is digital, I would very strongly encourage you to try something dramatically different. Maybe watercolor paint, maybe ink. Something that's going to be just a little bit different than what you invest most of your time in, and I think that you'll see tremendous benefits. Anytime you step out and you take a risk like this, though, make sure you stick to it long enough to actually see results. This is something probably that should have come up throughout this episode, but if you just take a risk for a moment, how's this going to look artistically? If you decide you're going to go start drawing from life for the first time, and you go outside one time and try to draw a tree for an hour, and it doesn't work out, that I don't think really counts. Like, that's the first step on that risk taking, but you haven't given that avenue long enough. Think about any of the mediums that you work with right now and how long it took to develop a level of proficiency. I'm not saying that you have to go invest 6 months into something to be an adequate risk, but you have to invest some amount of time. I've often jumped into new mediums and given myself like 3 or 4 hours, and I just don't find that that's enough. I often need to spend, 10 or 15 hours with a new medium to understand how it really impacts me. So, sorry, didn't mean to go off the rails right there, but I think that's really important. How to tell if you're risking too much. How often do you fail in your own eyes? How often do you look back at a piece of work and you go, I can't believe I did that? Now, this could be you're just too hard on yourself, but if it is the case, I want you to try to analyze your pieces and just try to figure out, are you always jumping out of your comfort zone? Are you always trying new things? Are you taking too many risks and it doesn't allow you to build up adequate confidence? You're not gaining enough ground in one location. Do you try new things and then step away from art for long periods? This can be a really good indicator that you're risking too much. You haven't found your comfort zone or you're not sticking to it enough. If you try new things, they don't work out, and then you don't make any art for weeks or for months, you might be in this arena where you're taking too many risks artistically. If you don't feel safe when you make art, if it feels like every time you jump into things you run yourself over, it's probably time to step back. Well, what about my thoughts on the matter? Well, I shared a bit earlier, but for me, risk-taking is not in my nature. I am a cautious person. I like the warm home, I like the hearth, I like not pushing myself, I tend to not take risks. I like things the way they are, or preferably the way that they were. So I have to do this. I have to step outside of myself and take risks. Otherwise, I find that I've just been doing the same thing for forever. I am pretty lazy by nature. If I had no pressures on me outside of anything, I could very easily find myself just living on the couch all day long. I would eventually, and this has become smaller gaps of time the older I've gotten, I would eventually come to really dislike myself because I'm not producing things. I found that I need a balance. Even in a perfect world where I have no responsibility, I would probably have to have 50% of my time allocated to doing things. Maybe 25% of that is just cooking and cleaning and, the stuff that you have to do to live. And the other 25% would probably have to be producing. But by my nature, I don't like taking risks. I am very, very cautious. And so I have to do this. This might not be you. Again, I've had a lot of students over the years where everything they do is exciting and they love jumping into new things. That's not me. If that's you, then perhaps this entire talk is going to come from a different angle. It's going to be you really thinking about how you can take risks that are wise and that are good for you. Whereas for me, if you're more akin to how I am, you just got to get out there and take a few more risks. Well, as always, thanks for being here. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, both about this topic in general and about anything else you'd like me to talk about in the future. Thank you to my patrons who are on the screen right now. If you want to check out my Patreon, it gives you access to some exclusive video content and updates, but it also just gives you the ability to support me. And thank you to all of you who do so. Our Discord server is also linked below. It is a lovely, free, and welcoming community. And if you need an artistic community, I would encourage you to check it out. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.